The twin suns of Velra were setting, painting the sky in pale orange and silver. The once beautiful capital city, Virelan, now looked like a dying ember under a storm of smoke. Buildings that once shone with crystal light lay shattered. The oceans that reflected the stars were now black with ash. The Velrans, tall, delicate beings with glowing skin and calm eyes, moved like ghosts through the ruins. They were healers, thinkers, singers of peace. War was not their way. They had built their civilization on harmony and reason, believing that violence belonged to lesser species. But peace had betrayed them. For the third night in a row, the skies screamed with pirate bombardments. Giant raider ships hovered above the atmosphere, raining molten metal on the surface. Their leader, a brutal reptilian warlord named Karth, didn't want resources. He wanted slaves. The Velrans had sent distress signals to all corners of the galaxy. Their allies in the Seraph Union had promised to protect them long ago. They believed the mighty fleets of the Union would arrive any minute. But every hour passed in silence. In the command hall beneath the ruined palace, Elder Sarai stood before the communication core. Her long silver tendrils trembled as she spoke into the transmitter. "Please, this is Velra Prime. Our cities are burning. Civilians are dying. We beg for assistance," her voice cracked. Static was the only reply. Behind her, younger Velrans whispered, "Do you think they abandoned us?" "No," one said. "The Union must be delayed. They always respond." But Elder Sarai knew the truth. The Union didn't care about worlds like Velra, peaceful, weak, and poor in resources. Still, she refused to give up. She turned to the engineer beside her. "Boost the signal. Send it through every relay, every frequency. Someone must hear us." The engineer nodded and began working. The signal pulsed through deep space, carried by hope and desperation. Somewhere out there, someone might listen. Hours later, the pirates broke through the last defense grid. Explosions ripped across the coastlines. The ground trembled as ships descended through the smoke. Elder Sarai stood on the balcony, staring up at the sky that once brought light. Now it brought only death. She whispered to herself, "If the stars will not send our friends, then maybe they will send mercy." Far away, on the edge of the galactic frontier in the dark between stars, a human patrol ship drifted through a quiet sector. The vessel was old, its hull scarred from asteroid impacts and plasma burns. It was not part of any great empire. It was part of Earth's defense accord, a fleet made of survivors, explorers, and warriors from the most dangerous planet known to the galaxy. Inside the ship's control room, Commander Hayes sat with a mug of black coffee, watching the navigation charts. The crew was small, only 30 humans, but each one of them was trained to fight, survive and repair anything that broke, including their own bones if needed. "Sir," the comms officer called out, "we're picking up a distress signal." Hayes frowned. "Origin?" "Planet Velra Prime. It's repeating every 3 minutes." "Full spectrum broadcast, Velra." "Never heard of it," he muttered. "Open it." The voice of Elder Sarai filled the room. The humans listened in silence as her trembling words played through the speakers. There was fear, pain, and hopelessness. When the recording ended, no one spoke for several seconds. "Do we have coordinates?" Hayes asked quietly. "Yes, sir." "Plot a jump." "Full burn." The helmsman hesitated. "Sir, that's deep in Seraph Union territory. If we go there, we could be crossing lines. We shouldn't." Hayes turned toward him with a calm but firm voice. "Someone's dying and nobody's answering. We're Deathworlders. That means we don't wait for permission." The helmsman nodded. "Aye, Commander." The engines roared to life. The ship turned toward the Velra system, and far behind them a fleet of human vessels began to wake. Back on Velra, the night was filled with terror. The pirates were inside the capital now. Fires burned on every street. The Velrans could hear the metallic footsteps of the invaders. A young Velran named Alera hid with her little brother inside a shattered temple. She held him close, whispering softly, "Don't look at the sky. Close your eyes. It will be over soon." But the boy didn't listen. He looked up through the cracked ceiling. The stars shimmered strangely. Then one of them moved. Then another. Then a dozen. The sky filled with light. Alera thought for a moment that it was another attack, until she noticed the colors. They weren't the blood red of pirate engines. They were cold blue, lined with trails of gold. And then she saw it, the largest ship she had ever imagined. Its hull was black like obsidian, its surface marked with scars, its shape not elegant but strong. The pirates saw it too. Their scanners screamed warnings. What in the void is that? One of them shouted. A pirate officer barked orders. Identify those ships. That doesn't look like any Union fleet. Before he got an answer, the sky opened in fire. The Deathworlders arrived, the first human missiles struck like thunder gods descending. Pirate ships shattered before they could react. Railgun rounds streaked across the atmosphere, cutting through metal like knives through silk. Velrans on the ground could only watch in awe as massive alien ships burned in the heavens. The human fleet didn't announce themselves, didn't negotiate, didn't threaten. They simply acted. From orbit, Commander Hayes gave his orders with calm precision. Target their carriers first. Keep the bombardment above the cities. We're not here to kill civilians. Roger that, sir. Dozens of tactical AI systems worked in perfect sync. Within minutes, the pirate flagship broke apart in a blinding flash. The remaining raiders tried to flee, but the humans pursued without mercy. When the last pirate vessel exploded, the sky finally went quiet. Only the faint hum of the human fleet's engines remained. After the fire the next morning, Velra was silent. Smoke drifted lazily over ruined buildings. The survivors stepped out, blinking at the strange sight of human dropships descending from the clouds. The Velrans hid at first, unsure if these new arrivals were conquerors. But then they saw something unexpected. The humans weren't carrying weapons. They were carrying medical supplies, water tanks and thermal blankets. One of them, a medic with tired eyes, knelt beside a wounded Velran child. He didn't speak her language, but he smiled and wrapped her arm in bandages. Across the ruined city, other humans began helping the survivors. They cleared debris, repaired generators, and shared their rations. When Elder Sarai saw them, her eyes filled with tears. These were the Deathworlders, the beings the galaxy feared, the monsters from a violent planet where everything tried to kill them. And yet, they had come not to destroy but to save. She approached the human commander as he stepped out of his shuttle. He was shorter than she expected, wrapped in a dark uniform, his face lined with fatigue. "Who are you?" she asked softly. He extended a hand. "Commander Hayes, Earth Defense Accord. We heard your signal. You are not part of the Seraph Union?" He shook his head. "No, ma'am. We're from Earth." She hesitated. "Why would you come here?" "There is nothing for you to gain." Hayes looked around at the devastation, then back at her, because no one else did. For the first time in many cycles, Elder Sarai felt something she had lost, hope. As the suns rose again over Velra, the once broken people watched the humans work tirelessly to rebuild. They whispered among themselves, stories of the Deathworlders who came when no one else cared. Above them, the human fleet orbited silently, their hulls gleaming like guardians in the dawn. The galaxy would soon hear what happened on Velra. They would learn that when peaceful worlds cried for help, sometimes the ones who answered were not the polite, not the noble, but the strongest hearts in the stars. The morning after the battle was quiet. For the first time in many nights, Velra's sky did not burn. The people who survived were still afraid to come out from their shelters. The air still smelled of smoke and the ground was covered with black dust. But slowly the Velrans stepped into the light. And what they saw filled them with wonder. Across the horizon, dozens of strange human ships rested gently on the ground. Some were heavy and gray with strange markings. Others were sleek and white, shaped like birds. Metal arms unfolded from their bellies, releasing machines that rolled across the ruins. Repair drones, medbots, and cargo crawlers. And everywhere the humans walked, they carried hope. Elder Sarai stood at the broken steps of the palace as a human convoy approached. Commander Hayes walked at the front, wearing a helmet under his arm, his uniform dirty but neat. Behind him marched men and women of Earth, engineers, doctors, soldiers, and pilots, all working together as if they had done this 1,000 times before. When Hayes reached her, he gave a short nod. "Elder Sarai," he said. His voice was calm yet carried a quiet strength. "You know my name," she said softly. "Our translators picked up your broadcast," he replied. "You called for help." She studied him carefully. "You came from Earth, a world the galaxy calls a death world." Hayes gave a faint smile. "That's what they call us, yes. But we prefer to think of it as home." Sarai looked up at the sky, where massive human cruisers still floated like silver blades. "And those ships, they destroyed the pirates in minutes. I've never seen such power." Hayes's expression darkened slightly. Power is only useful when it protects the weak. Otherwise, it's just cruelty. That answer struck her heart. As the day passed, the humans spread across the city. They built medical camps using portable shelters and energy domes. Human medics treated hundreds of injured Velruns. They had medicine for every burn, every wound, and every infection. What surprised the Velruns most was how gentle these Deathworlders were. Despite their scars and their heavy armor, they moved carefully, spoke softly, and treated even the smallest child with care. A young medic named Sarah knelt beside a Velrun boy whose arm was broken. She smiled as she wrapped his arm in a glowing bandage that hardened instantly. The boy looked at her glowing blue eyes and whispered in fear, "Will it hurt?" Sarah laughed gently. "No, it will make you feel better, promise." He looked confused. "You are from Earth. Aren't you all fighters?" Sarah paused, then said, "We fight, yes, but mostly we fight so others don't have to." By noon, the pirates' bodies had been cleared from the streets. The human soldiers moved quietly, collecting weapons and scanning for survivors. Commander Hayes and his tactical officer, Lieutenant Parker, reviewed the reports. "Sir, most of the pirate fleet is gone," Parker said, holding a datapad. "But we've got readings of small escape pods heading toward the outer moons." Hayes nodded. "Send interceptors. No survivors get away to tell lies about what happened here." "Yes, sir." Parker hesitated for a moment before asking, "You think the Seraph Union will care we crossed into their territory?" Hayes looked toward the twin suns setting over the burning ocean. "They didn't care when Velra burned. Why should I care what they think now?" That evening, Elder Sarai invited Commander Hayes to speak in the rebuilt council chamber, a half-ruined dome lit by human lamps. Several Velran leaders had gathered, their faces still pale from shock. They bowed slightly as Hayes entered. He didn't expect such respect, but he nodded politely. "Commander Hayes," Elder Sarai began, "your people saved ours. We owe you a debt beyond words. But we must understand, why? You came with no promise of reward, no treaty. Why risk your ships, your lives?" Hayes looked around the room. He saw fear, exhaustion, and confusion. Then he said quietly, "When I was a boy on Earth, I lived through a war. We were surrounded by chaos, hunger, fear, loss. No one came to help us either. But my people survived because we helped each other. When someone cries for help now, we answer. That's our rule." One of the Velron counselors spoke. "But you could have ignored us." "Many would," Hayes nodded. "Many did. But we humans, we don't like standing by while bullies win. It's not in our blood." The chamber was silent. The Velrans had always believed the Deathworlders were savage and cruel. But now they saw something else. A fire, yes, but one that warmed instead of burned. Outside the city at the same time, a small group of pirates who had escaped crash-landed on the edge of the desert. They had watched the destruction of their fleet and now hid inside a wrecked shuttle. Their leader, a wounded reptilian named Karth, growled in rage. "Deathworlders, humans, I'll make them pay." But before he could move, a shadow passed overhead. A small human recon drone hovered silently, its red light blinking. Moments later, human soldiers dropped from the sky using thruster packs. Their armor glowed faintly in the dusk. "Contact," said one soldier over the radio. 10 hostiles. "Surrender not attempted." Karth screamed and fired his plasma rifle. The humans didn't even flinch. Their return fire was precise, clean, and over in seconds. The human commander, Sergeant Vale, looked down at the fallen warlord and muttered, "You should have stayed in the shadows." Then they marked the site for cleanup and lifted off, leaving nothing behind but sand and silence. Nightfall. As the twin moons rose, Velra finally rested. The humans set up night patrols, scanning the skies for danger. Elder Sarai walked through the human camp quietly. She saw soldiers eating from metal packs, laughing softly despite their exhaustion. They looked so normal, like her own people once were before fear ruled their hearts. She approached a campfire where 2 humans were repairing a drone. "You work even after saving a world?" she asked. One of them smiled. "Ma'am, saving is the easy part. Keeping it safe, that's the real work." She looked at their rough hands, scarred and strong, and wondered how such a dangerous race could hold such compassion. When she returned to her quarters, she looked out of her window toward the night sky. The human ships floated above, silent and watchful. She whispered a prayer, not to her gods, but to the strange humans who had answered her call. Aboard the human flagship high above the planet, The command deck of the EDA Resolute buzzed with quiet energy. Commander Hayes stood by the main viewport staring down at Velra's glowing oceans. His second officer, Lieutenant Parker, joined him. "We've stabilized the capital, sir. Medical supplies are being distributed planet-wide. The Velrans are rebuilding faster than we expected." Hayes nodded. "Good, keep the ships in low orbit for now. I want every remaining pirate signal scrubbed clean." Parker hesitated. "Sir, there's something else. We've intercepted a transmission, a message sent from a Seraph Union outpost nearby. They just found out what happened here." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "And? They're not happy. They're sending diplomats, maybe even warships." Hayes smirked. "Let them come. Maybe they'll learn what real protection looks like." The morning after, when dawn came again, the city of Virilan was alive with new energy. Velran children followed human engineers, watching as they built new solar towers from human alloy. Merchants returned to the markets. Healers worked side by side with human medics. Elder Sarai called a meeting at the central plaza. Every citizen who could walk gathered there. Commander Hayes stood quietly among his soldiers, unsure why he was invited. Then Sarai raised her voice so all could hear. "People of Velra," she said, her voice clear and strong. "We sent a cry for help to our allies, and they did not come. But strangers, and from a world we feared, heard our voice and came instead." She turned toward the humans. "They call themselves Deathworlders, but we know them now as Defenders. Let the galaxy remember that name." The crowd erupted into applause, their voices echoing through the ruined streets. Hayes bowed his head slightly. He was not one for speeches, but in that moment, even he felt a sting in his chest. Pride mixed with quiet sorrow. Later that day, in a quiet corner of the camp, Alara, the young Velran girl from before, approached Hayes. She carried a small shell in her hands. "This is for you," she said shyly. "It's from the Sea of Velra. We give these to those we owe life to." Hayes knelt, taking the shell gently. "Thank you, little one," she smiled. "Will you go away now?" "Not yet," he said. "We'll stay until your skies are safe." She looked at the massive human ship in the distance. "And then? Then we'll go where the next cry for help comes from." That night, as the stars shone bright over the calm ocean, Elder Sarai sent a new message to the galaxy. "This is Velra Prime. To those who ignored our call, know this. We were saved not by words, not by treaties, but by those who lived through hell and chose kindness anyway. The Deathworlders have come, and they are not what you think." Across the stars, that message spread, reaching governments, empires, and warlords. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy whispered one word with both fear and respect. The twin suns rose slowly over Velra, touching the rebuilt streets with soft gold. The war was over, but the world was still healing. Ruins stood like dark scars between the growing camps of light where humans and Velrans worked together. It had been only a few days since the battle, yet the city already looked alive again. Children played near water tanks built by human engineers. Velran healers shared knowledge with human medics. The sound of laughter had returned, faint but real. Elder Sarai stood at the edge of the new human camp. Her eyes followed the tall metal towers the humans had raised overnight. They looked rough and heavy, nothing like the elegant crystal spires her people once built. Yet those towers worked. They powered entire districts, giving light to hospitals and homes. She smiled faintly. "Ugly," she murmured, "but beautiful." Commander Hayes watched from the other side of the camp, arms crossed, a half-empty cup of coffee in his hand. His armor was scuffed, his eyes red from sleepless nights, but he looked content. His second officer, Lieutenant Parker, approached with a data pad. "Sir, reconstruction progress is ahead of schedule. Local water lines are secure. The Velrans have also requested we teach them how to build more of our power units." Hayes nodded. "Good, give them everything they ask for. They'll need to stand on their own after we're gone." Parker hesitated. "Sir, are we leaving soon?" Hayes looked toward the horizon, where a massive storm brewed over the ocean. "Soon enough, but not before I'm sure this world can defend itself." Later that morning, Elder Sarai invited Commander Hayes to walk through the city. She wanted him to see what his people had done. As they walked, Velrans bowed slightly when they saw Hayes, not out of fear, but respect. A few children ran beside him, curious about his weapons and armor. One even touched his hand. something unheard of between alien races on Velra. Hayes smiled softly. They're not afraid of me anymore. Sarai nodded. They see your heart, not your armor. He chuckled. Most of the galaxy doesn't look that close. They reached the central square where human soldiers were building a memorial. At its center stood a broken piece of metal, a fragment from the first pirate ship destroyed. Around it, Velran and human workers placed flowers, seashells, and carved stones. Sarai touched the cool surface of the metal. This then came from the sky that once killed us, and now it will remind us of those who saved us. Hayes was quiet. It'll remind them that no one is too small to fight back. As days passed, the bond between humans and Velrans grew stronger. The Velrans learned fast how to use tools, how to fix machines, even how to handle small weapons. The humans, in turn, learned about Velran healing and their telepathic empathy. Velran doctors could feel pain in others, and with practice they taught the humans how to sense it too, at least in small ways. One evening in the main medical tent, Medic Sarah sat beside a Velran healer named Leorin. They worked together over a patient, a soldier injured during the pirate cleanup. Leorin placed her glowing hands over the human's chest, closing her eyes. "He feels guilt more than pain," she said softly. Sarah blinked. "You can feel that?" "Yes, it's heavy in his heart," Sarah sighed. "That's a human thing too. We always feel guilty for what we couldn't save." Leorin smiled gently. "Then your hearts are much alike to ours." Outside the tent, Hayes overheard the conversation and paused. He didn't interrupt, but a small smile crossed his face. Humanity had been called monsters by many races, yet here they were, learning compassion from beings of peace. The message from the stars 3 days later. A signal reached the human flagship EDA Resolute. The comms officer rushed to Hayes' office. "Sir, it's from the Seraph Union. They've arrived in system, 15 ships." Hayes frowned. 15? That's a peace fleet. "Yes, sir. They're demanding a meeting with you and Elder Sarai." Hayes sighed, putting down his coffee. "Of course they are. Took them long enough." The Seraph Union arrival. When the Union fleet entered orbit, their ships glittered like jewels. Perfect white hulls, golden lights, and banners of peace. They were everything the galaxy admired. Elegant, calm, and proud. They descended into Velra's atmosphere with ceremony and self-importance. From the largest ship stepped the Seraph ambassador, a tall silver-skinned being wrapped in silk robes. He smiled politely as he greeted Elder Sarai and Commander Hayes on the landing platform. "Elder Sarai," the ambassador said in a smooth voice, "we came as soon as we received your distress call." Sarai's face remained calm. "That call was sent nearly 10 cycles ago." The ambassador blinked. "Yes, well, communication delays, you understand. The Union governs many systems. We had to verify the situation first." Hayes crossed his arms. "Verify while her people were dying?" The ambassador looked at him, eyes narrow. "Ah, you must be one of the Deathworlders. Your presence here is not authorized." Hayes gave a small grin. "Neither were the pirates. I figured it was open season." The ambassador's smile faded. "You violated Union territory. You destroyed ships that did not threaten your world. You've overstepped." Sarai's voice turned cold. "Those ships burned my cities and enslaved my people. And when we begged for help, you did nothing." The ambassador hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Elder, diplomacy takes time." "No," she interrupted. "Compassion takes no time. It takes courage. And that, it seems, your Union has lost." Hayes said nothing. He just stood beside her, a quiet wall of iron and pride. A clash of values later, inside the council chamber, the discussion continued. The Seraph diplomats argued that humans were reckless savages whose methods endangered stability. Hayes finally spoke. "You call us reckless because we don't wait for permission to help the innocent. If that's savagery, then I'll wear the title proudly," the ambassador sneered. "You humans fight like beasts." Hayes stared at him for a moment, then said quietly, "Maybe. But sometimes it takes beasts to keep monsters away." Elder Sarai stood beside him. "Commander Hayes speaks truth. You did not come when we needed peace. He came when we needed life." The room fell silent. The Seraph diplomats exchanged uneasy looks. They had expected gratitude, not shame. Finally, the ambassador sighed. "We will issue an apology to Velra and assist with rebuilding." Sarai nodded politely. "Your words are welcome. But remember, The ones who saved us asked for nothing. The hidden gift after the meeting, Hayes walked alone through the city. The sunset cast a red glow over the repaired streets. He stopped near the memorial and touched the rough metal again. He didn't notice Elder Sarai approaching behind him. "You spoke well today," she said softly. Hayes shook his head. "I spoke honestly." "That's all," she smiled. "Honesty is rare in the stars." He looked at her, then back at the sky. "We're not perfect, Elder. We fight too much. We make mistakes, but we try. That's what matters," Sarai nodded. "And that's what makes you stronger than the rest. You rise again, no matter how many times the universe tries to break you." She reached into her robe and handed him a small crystal sphere. Inside, faint blue light pulsed. "This is the heart of Velra," she said. "It holds our world's history, our songs, our memories. We give it only to those who have earned our eternal trust." Hayes took it carefully. "That's too much." "It's not enough," she said. For a long moment, neither spoke. The sound of waves echoed softly against the distant shore. A night of stories. That night, the humans and Velrans shared a feast in the main square. It was the first time in years that Velra had music again. Human soldiers told stories of Earth, of deserts that burned and oceans that froze, of storms that could crush steel but never broke human spirit. The Velrans listened in amazement. They couldn't understand how a world so cruel could create beings so kind. One Velran asked, "Your world sounds terrible. How did you survive it?" A human engineer smiled. "We didn't just survive it. We learned from it. Every scar teaches us how to stand again." Another soldier raised his glass. "To Deathworlders and cursed by nature but too stubborn to die." The crowd laughed and cheered. Even the Velrans joined, their melodic voices mixing with human shouts. For that one night, there were no aliens, no saviors, no victims, just living beings celebrating survival. Later, when the camp grew quiet, Hayes stood near the ocean. The waves shimmered under the twin moons. He thought of home, of Earth, of its endless struggle. Maybe humanity's curse was also its gift, the will to fight when others gave up. Parker joined him, holding a small drink pouch. "You think we'll ever be seen as heroes, sir?" Hayes smiled faintly. "Heroes? No, the galaxy will always be scared of us, but maybe one day they'll understand us. And if they don't?" Hayes looked at the stars. "Then we'll just keep showing them who we are, one world at a time." The next morning, Elder Sarai watched as the humans prepared their ships. The Seraph Union had agreed to stay and assist in rebuilding, though their pride was wounded. The Deathworlders had done their job. They had saved a world, changed hearts, and proven that kindness could come from the most unlikely place. When Hayes boarded his shuttle, Sarai sent one last message through the human comms channel. "Commander Hayes, wherever your people go, may the stars remember that when Velra cried for help." The Deathworlders answered. Hayes smiled as the engines ignited. "We always will, Elder. That's what humans do." The fleet lifted into the morning light, their dark ships gleaming against the rising suns. The Velrans watched until they vanished into the clouds, whispering The days after the battle felt like waking from a long nightmare for the people of Velra. The cities still smoked and the skies carried the faint scent of burned metal. But there was life again. Children laughed softly in the camps. Water flowed through new pipelines and light shone in the shelters humans had built. The Deathworlders stayed longer than anyone expected. Their huge ship still hung in orbit, dark and silent like guardians that refused to rest. On the surface, soldiers and engineers worked side by side with the Velrans. The once frightened alien people had begun to trust these strange humans, the ones who had arrived when no one else did. Commander Hale, leader of the Earth Expeditionary Fleet, stood near the edge of a rebuilt city plaza. His armor was scratched, his uniform covered in dust, but he smiled as he watched a group of Velran children chase a hovering drone, laughing as it dipped and spun. A Velran elder named Saris floated beside him, her translucent skin glowing faintly in the sunlight. "You humans," she said softly, "you destroy with such force but rebuild with such care." "It is confusing to us," Hale chuckled. "We've had a lot of practice doing both." Saris tilted her head. "Your people, they frighten the galaxy." "Yeah," Hale replied quietly. "But fear's not all bad. It keeps the pirates and slavers away. It gives us time to do the right thing." Saris looked up at the sky, where the blue atmosphere shimmered against the metal silhouettes of the human ships. You did the right thing when no one else did. Hale didn't answer. He just nodded once and turned back toward the busy camp. On the fourth day, the long-awaited Allied fleet finally arrived. The sky filled with sleek silver ships shaped like flowing arrows. Their hulls gleamed, covered with the markings of the Celeran Alliance, the same governments that had promised to protect Velra but never came. Hale watched their arrival from the command tent, his arms folded. Around him, human officers exchanged silent looks. They all knew what this was, politics arriving late to claim the victory. The Celeran flagship descended slowly, surrounded by escort drones and light cruisers. Its landing was perfect, graceful, almost theatrical. The moment the hatch opened, a group of tall, shimmering diplomats stepped out. Their skin glittered like glass, their clothes more art than armor. One of them, a long-faced alien with deep violet eyes, stepped forward and spoke in a cold, melodic tone. "I am Ambassador Relthar of the Celeran Alliance. We came as soon as we could." Hale didn't respond. He simply waited. Relthar's eyes moved over the human camp. The crude steel shelters, the noisy machinery, the armored soldiers who stood with hands on their weapons. The ambassador's lips curled slightly. "So it is true," he said. "The Deathworlders arrived first." "Yeah," Hale said. "About 2 weeks first?" The ambassador frowned. 2 weeks? That is impressive considering your technology." Hale shrugged. "We heard the distress call. We don't like bullies." Later that day, the Celeran delegation toured the Velran capital ruins, escorted by both humans and Velrans. Everywhere they looked, they saw human-built power grids, human medbays, and human guards watching quietly as survivors were given food. Relthar looked displeased. "You have changed much here," he said. "Without authorization." Hale raised an eyebrow. "Authorization? These people were dying." The ambassador gave a thin smile. "We appreciate your enthusiasm. But the Alliance had protocols. You may have violated several." Saris, who walked beside Hale, finally spoke. "Protocols?" she asked, her soft voice trembling with anger. "When our children screamed, your protocols were silent. When our oceans burned, your ships stayed still. It was the Deathworlders who came, not you." Relthar stiffened. "We had to ensure the pirates would not target our own colonies." "The decision was strategic." Hale stepped forward. His tone was calm, but his words carried weight. "Strategic. That's a pretty word for cowardice." The ambassador's face hardened. "You humans think war is simple, but we have learned that mercy and timing are better than brute strength." Hale gestured toward the rebuilt hospital. "Mercy? Tell that to the ones who died waiting for you." The silence that followed was heavy. Even the wind seemed to pause. That evening, in the temporary command center, tension grew between the two forces. The Celeran diplomats wanted to take command of the relief effort. They argued that the humans' presence could destabilize interspecies relations, but the Velrans refused. Every council elder voted to keep the humans in charge of reconstruction. They trusted the Deathworlders more than their former allies, a decision that sent waves of quiet outrage through the Celeran ranks. In one corner of the tent, a human engineer whispered to another, "Never thought we'd see the day aliens preferred us over their own." His friend smirked. "Guess they figured out who actually shows up when it counts." The next morning, Relthar confronted Hale again. This time, the ambassador brought an entire escort of guards. "This is unacceptable," Relthar said sharply. "You have turned the Velrans against the Alliance. You humans are reckless, dangerous, and unpredictable. You fight like savages." Hale didn't move. He just stared at the ambassador for a long moment before answering. "Maybe we do," he said finally. "But savages rebuild what you let burn." Relthar's eyes narrowed. "Your kind will never understand civilization." Hale smiled faintly. "Maybe civilization needs a little less talk and a little more action." Before the ambassador could respond, Saris entered the tent. Her expression was calm, but her eyes shone with quiet power. "Commander Hale," she said, "our council has made a decision." Hale turned to her. "What kind?" "The Velran people will no longer rely on the Celeran Alliance for protection. From this day we will form our own defense, with guidance from the humans." Relthar's voice rose in fury. "This is madness. You cannot—" Saris cut him off, her telepathic voice echoing in every mind present. "We can, and we will." The announcement spread quickly across the planet. The Celeran ships withdrew in anger, their diplomats shouting about violations of treaty law. But the Velrans didn't care. For the first time in generations, they felt free. Hale watched the Celeran fleet vanish into hyperspace, then turned to his second-in-command. "Guess we made some new enemies today," the officer grinned. "And some good friends, too." In the following weeks, humans continued to train Velran volunteers, teaching them how to use defense drones, basic combat tactics, and emergency engineering. The aliens learned fast. Their telepathic coordination made them excellent pilots, and their empathy made them careful guardians. Saris often said, "You taught us strength through kindness. We will not forget that." The humans prepared to leave soon after, but their mark was already left behind, not on the ground, but in hearts. The Velrans had gone from a fearful, peaceful race to one that understood courage. Before the fleet's departure, a final meeting was held between Hale and Saris. They stood on a high platform overlooking the rebuilt city. Below them, both species worked together, humans teaching, Velrans learning. "Your people changed us," Saris said quietly. "We saw power in your anger, but also hope in your compassion." Hale nodded. "That's humanity for you. We're messy, but we don't walk away." Saris smiled faintly. "When the universe sees your ships, they tremble. But now we know better. Behind the fire and iron, there are hearts that still believe in helping strangers." Hale looked toward the sky, where the first human ships were preparing for jump. "Let's hope the galaxy remembers that." As the Deathworlders' fleet rose into the upper atmosphere, every Velran city turned its lights upward in farewell. The humans didn't expect gratitude, Marie, but they got it anyway. When the last human ship vanished into the stars, the Velrans stood in silence. They knew something had changed forever. The Celeran Alliance had power. The humans had purpose. The sky above Velra burned gold as the twin suns rose over the horizon. For the first time in many cycles, the city of Virilan was alive, whole and vibrant. The streets were no longer covered in ash, the rivers no longer poisoned, and the air smelled faintly of fresh metal and sea. But the most important change was not visible to the eye. It was in the hearts of the Velrans. Children laughed freely as they ran past human-built power towers. Young Velran apprentices carried tools beside human engineers. Soldiers trained together with instructors from Earth, learning tactics, patience, and discipline. Everywhere there were reminders of what could be achieved when courage met kindness. Elder Sarai walked slowly through the central plaza, her eyes shining with pride. She observed a human medic teaching a group of Velran children how to carry injured adults safely. She watched a small squadron of young Velran pilots practicing drone maneuvers in the sky. Their movements precise, confident, and coordinated, far beyond what anyone on Velra had ever imagined possible. "Velra is no longer a world waiting to die," she whispered softly to herself. "It is alive again, stronger than before." The departure in orbit, the Deathworlder fleet prepared to leave. Commander Hayes stood on the bridge of the flagship EDA Resolute, looking down at the planet they had saved. His crew moved efficiently around him, checking systems and fueling engines for the jump. Lieutenant Parker approached, holding a data pad. "Sir, all Velran defenses are operational. They have the knowledge to protect themselves now." Hayes nodded. "Good, that's the real mission complete. Saving lives is only half the story. Teaching them to survive is the rest." He walked to the viewport, watching the rising sun glint against the city's new towers. "They called us savages," he murmured. Maybe they were right. But sometimes savages are the only ones who fight when others look away. Parker smiled faintly. "The galaxy is going to remember this, sir." "Velra won't forget." Hayes allowed himself a small grin. "Neither will I." The message across the stars back on Velra, Elder Sarai sent a message to neighboring systems. Her words carried hope, warning, and pride. "We were abandoned when our cries were heard. But strangers from the stars came anyway. They came without promise, without treaty, without selfish need. They came to save us. Their courage will not be forgotten. They are called Deathworlders, and they are our guardians." Across the galaxy, systems that had once ignored Velra received the message. Warlords, merchants, diplomats, and governors alike paused when they heard it. The word human began to spread, not with fear alone, but with a new respect. Humans were no longer just survivors of a dangerous world. They were the kind of beings that could shape the destiny of others, protectors, teachers, and fierce allies. The change within Velra over the next cycles. Velra changed dramatically. The Velruns began to build a new fleet, incorporating designs inspired by human technology. Drones, energy shields, and fast attack craft were now standard. They combined these with their own psychic and telepathic abilities to create a defense system unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Soldiers trained with humans on simulation fields, practicing not only combat but coordination, trust, and improvisation. Each day they grew stronger, faster, and more confident. Elder Sarai often watched from a tower, her eyes filled with pride. "These humans," she said to a counselor, "they didn't just save our lives. They gave us the courage to save ourselves." The counselor nodded. "We were weak before, but now we are something more. We are Velra reborn." The return of the Union months later, the Celerin Alliance sent another delegation, this time a full fleet of diplomats and ships. They had come to reassert authority and demand that Velra fall back under their protection. But things had changed. The Velrans no longer cowered. The city was well defended. Human advisors stood openly beside Velran commanders. The Alliance delegation found themselves facing a planet that could fight and win without them. Ambassador Relthar stepped forward, voice polite but firm. "Elder Sarai, we have come to negotiate terms of protection." Sarai's voice was calm, unwavering. "You were absent when our people needed you most. We have learned to protect ourselves. You may offer words, but we no longer rely on your fleets." Relthar's eyes widened, realizing the depth of the change. Hale, standing quietly behind the Velran Council, watched the diplomats falter. "This world," Hale said softly to Parker, "has been remade, not by the Alliance but by those who dared to act. The human influence, even after the fleet left, humans continued to influence Velra. Communication lines were maintained. Advisors provided ongoing training and counsel. When new threats arose, Velran and human forces worked together seamlessly, as if they had been allies for generations. The Velran people adopted some human values: courage, resilience, and the belief that survival was not enough without action. They combined it with their own empathy and wisdom to become a civilization that could defend itself while still upholding the ideals of peace. A young Velran pilot named Alera, who had once hidden in fear during the pirate attacks, now led her own squadron of defense drones. She remembered the first time humans had landed, their strange ways, their power, and their kindness. They were monsters, she whispered to herself once, and yet they were the ones who saved us. Her squadron laughed at her words, but they understood the truth. Humanity's strength was not in their armor or weapons. It was in their choices. The galaxy's response news of Velra's transformation spread quickly. Other systems began to whisper about the humans who arrived without orders, destroyed pirate fleets, healed the wounded, and taught entire civilizations to defend themselves. Some envied them. Others feared them, but all respected them. Reports reached distant warlords and empires. If humans come for you, you either survive or you disappear, and if they save you, your life will never be the same. The Deathworlders legend began, not as conquerors, not as tyrants, but as unpredictable forces of both destruction and salvation. A farewell one final time. Commander Hayes returned to Velra to see the planet before leaving for new missions. Elder Sarai met him at the main landing platform. "Commander," she said softly, handing him a small crystal orb. Inside, faint blue light pulsed. "This is the heart of Velra," she explained. "It holds our songs, our memories, and the courage we gained because of you. Keep it, so that wherever you go, you remember us." Hayes took it carefully, holding it as if it were the most fragile treasure in the galaxy. "We'll remember, Elder, and we'll be back if you ever need us again." Sarai smiled faintly. "I hope we won't need you. But if we do, we will not be afraid." The human shuttle lifted off quietly, engines glowing against the rising suns. Velran children waved from the streets, soldiers saluted, and Elder Sarai watched until the ship disappeared into the stars. The true legacy years later, Velra became known as a planet that could defend itself, rich in culture, science, and strength. Its people often spoke of the Deathworlders not as terrifying outsiders, but as heroes who had reshaped their destiny. They passed stories from one generation to the next, tales of ships that tore through the sky, hands that healed without magic, and warriors who fought not for glory, but because it was the right thing to do. The galaxy, too, remembered. Governments, empires, and even warlords who had once ignored Velro's cries learned that actions mattered more than words. They had witnessed what humans could do, and they feared and respected them for it. Somewhere in the far reaches of space, the Deathworlder fleet continued its silent patrol. They didn't seek fame, rewards, or thanks. They moved from system to system, answering cries for help, teaching survival, and leaving lessons behind. And when a world fell silent in despair, someone somewhere whispered the same truth. When the stars cry for help, the Deathworlders will come, and they will change everything. Velra would never forget. The galaxy would never forget. And humanity would continue to rise, one world at a time.